Tonight on One News, it's all cheer for Tony Blair. Labour gains a second ringing endorsement to rule Britannia.
There is no greater honour than to serve you as Prime Minister. And you have given us, tonight, an historic moment for the Labour Party.
A new political row brews over the development of Whitianga Wasteland.
There could be a Maori rebellion over this.
One of Robert Muldoon's closest political allies has died. We pay tribute to Duncan McIntyre.
And how they're trying to tame the tiger, the bid to make a Kiwi course more difficult for the world's best.
Our top story, a history-making Labour landslide in Britain.
Tony Blair's become the first British Labour leader to win successive general elections. And again, it's been a rout. Labour's majority in the House of Commons will be almost identical to the one it gained 4 years ago. And the once mighty Conservative Party is left in the parliamentary wilderness. As we go to air, counting is still going on, but latest projections from the BBC show Labour will have more than 400 MPs. The Tories have just 167, almost exactly where they were after the '97 election. The Liberal Democrats have gained more seats, also at the expense of the Tories. All this means Tony Blair's new Labour will govern with a huge 165-seat majority. Our Europe correspondent Ian Sinclair has more on an historic day in British politics.
An exhausting campaign ends in celebration for Tony Blair. He's become the first Labour leader to win 2 consecutive terms in office.
It is indeed a night of history for our party. But the one thing that we have to remember is that now is the time that the people of this country want us to serve them, want us to do the things that we promised that we will do.
Earlier, a gracious but disappointed Conservative leader, William Hague, conceded defeat.
The Labour Party will continue to form the government, and I congratulate them on their victory and have already spoken to Mr. Blair to congratulate him.
But the crushing defeat may cost Hague his leadership, unlike the man of the moment. As he left his home in northeast England to hear his own electorate result declared, Tony Blair already had victory in sight. The first exit poll from voters predicted a landslide Labour victory, but with a record low turnout. Both proved right. It was the lowest voter turnout since 1918, with 43% of eligible voters staying at home. Hardly a ringing endorsement of Labour's 4 years in office.
The policies and the foundations that we have laid over these past few years give us the ability now to complete the task that we set ourselves.
The first wave of official results was all Labour. Blair's Treasury Chief, Gordon Brown, won re-election in Scotland with a huge majority.
And I believe that the scale of our victory and the wide margin between ourselves and our opponents reflects not just that we have won the battle of votes, but we are winning the battle of ideas.
The Conservatives' hope of a comeback had been dashed. Their campaign against the single European currency misjudged the mood of the country.
There is no doubt that the results tonight across the country are deeply disappointing for my party. And I feel for the candidates and the activists and supporters in other constituencies who have worked so hard for so little reward.
For the third largest party, the Liberal Democrats, it was a night to consolidate and add to the gains they made last election. Overall, British voters proved resistance to politics this time and showed their indifference, even those who bothered to vote, by delivering a result which looks almost identical to the last one.
You see, and that jubilation in the Labour camp must be muted by that very low voter turnout.
It certainly is, because, you know, you have to remember that back in 1918, the troops were only, half the voters were only stamping the mud off their boots, and in fact, women didn't even have the vote. So at this time, to be so low is very bad, and in fact, the truth is that only 1 in 4 British voters really turned out to vote for the Labour Party, gave it their endorsement. So it could be said that the real winner here was apathy.
So Ian, does this give Tony Blair the mandate that he wants to join the euro?
It might seem to in the House, in that he has this considerable majority. He's been returned with the same one as before. The fact is, though, that Labour is not entirely united on this issue of the euro. There's real concern among some members, particularly Gordon Brown, for example, as we understand it, that we shouldn't, or the British should not rush into this whole business, because there is such a disparity between the pound and the euro that simply to leap in there and adopt a common currency would cause chaos here to the British economy. Chaos they don't need, because right now what some are saying is Mr. Blair should be using this mandate to effect real change in schools and hospitals, as he promised.
Ian, thank you. Europe correspondent Ian Sinclair, live from London.
The election's been marred by a shooting in Northern Ireland. A gunman fired on a queue of voters outside a school polling booth in Draperstown in County Londonderry. 3 people were wounded, including 2 police officers. It's not yet clear who's to blame for the attack.
But here there's been a partying atmosphere. It was for a gathering at the British High Commission in Wellington, and it was very British. Political reporter Garth Bray checked it out.
Half a world away, election results come at a more civilised hour and with help from some fine English traditions.
Because we have so many people from New Zealand going over on OE, they like to know what they're going over to, you know, what the flavour of the country is.
More party than party political, the host is keen to strengthen ties no matter who wins.
There's still very strong trading links, there's still very strong political links.
Our politicians are anxious to paint results favourably for their party.
Tony Blair's up front. He gets out there and fronts an issue. He doesn't let them fester, and I've certainly learned a lot watching him operate as a leader.
There's a huge gap between the Blair Labor government and the Clark Labor government in this country. As I said before, the sort of things that Blair's doing in terms of public and private sector partnerships would drive them nuts in this country.
But a winning campaign is a bit like a good get-together. Keep them well fed, and there are fewer grumbles.
The silent story behind this election victory is clearly the economy. You know, people are doing very, very well in Britain. Interest rates are low, inflation's low, real wages have gone up, house prices have gone up. I mean, it's an ideal mix for any government to get re-elected.
So no surprises from the English cuisine, and no surprises either from the election result. The chips were well and truly down to the Tories. Labour had it all wrapped up. Garth Bray, One News.
And late edition, we'll have more on the British election. That's tonight at 10:30.
In other news, there have been rumblings today of racial tension over a land development battle in the Coromandel. The chair of the Whitianga Community Board claims the Deputy Prime Minister warned her of a Maori rebellion. And Whitianga Maori say they've been threatened by backers of the development, which is now being debated by a select committee. Andrew Potter has the latest.
A $5,000 a day headache that just won't go away. Developer Lee Hopper wants to turn this Whitianga wasteland into a huge canal housing project. But that was harpooned last month when Conservation Minister Sandra Lee invoked the new Hauraki Gulf Marine Park Act. The Whitianga Community Board wants the project to go ahead. Today, its chair told a select committee of a conversation she had with the Deputy Prime Minister after the row blew up.
He said there could be a Maori rebellion over this. Then he went on to say that he didn't think it was very worthwhile for any of us to come to Wellington.
But in Parliament 2 weeks ago, Mr Anderton denied saying those words.
Did he tell Joan Gaskell, the chair of the Whitianga Community Board last Friday, that the government risked a, quote, Maori rebellion as the reason why the government had reneged on its commitment to pass legislation this week? If not, was the issue of Maori rebellion with respect to the government's caucuses?
Speaker, the answer is no, and no.
And today, Mr Anderton reiterated his stance.
Mrs Gaskell is wrong, and I have significant witnesses who will verify that I am telling the truth.
But Mrs Gaskell claims her notes of the conversation prove the comments were made.
Yeah, there. He said he didn't say it. I say he did say it, and that's it.
Others in favour of the development warn the protracted debate is creating racial tension.
Quite honestly, I think maybe the opposite is probably more likely, but the Pākehā rebellion was pretty close at hand.
Local Māori, though, say intimidation against those opposing the development is increasing.
Some of the people who did speak against the waterways at the meeting have since been hassled and had threatening phone calls, etc.
The Select Committee is expected to report its findings to Parliament next Tuesday. Andrew Potter, One News.
A double fatality 3 years ago has cost Motorsport New Zealand $25,000. It's been ordered to pay $10,000 each to the families of the 2 spectators killed at the Queenstown street race. An Invercargill judge also ruled the remaining money should be shared by the 2 injured survivors. John McDermott has more.
the sister of one of the spectators killed. Pleased, Motorsport New Zealand has accepted responsibility.
Terry was a loved family member, and now we can move on and grieve without his loss being in the public arena.
Her brother, Terence Tubman, and his mate, James Mackey, were killed by this out-of-control race car. Motorsport New Zealand admitted today that it was a late entry and shouldn't have been allowed to take part. It also acknowledged motor racing people will learn from the tragedy.
This conviction in my submission will serve as a reminder and a lesson to all those persons that safety cannot and should never be compromised.
The Crown told the hearing the deaths should have been avoided.
Motorsport New Zealand accepts that the consequence of permitting the motor race in 1998 was that the race was run on an unsafe circuit, which exposed spectators and residents to possible danger.
In sentencing, Judge Phil Moran described Motorsport's guilty plea and the withdrawal of charges against 4 volunteers as a sensible outcome.
It affords an opportunity for amends to be made to victims, and it allows 4 decent and upright men who've given years of loyal service to their sport to exit these proceedings without a blot on their escutcheons.
I believe the prosecution will result in lives being saved in the future.
As the case ends, Motorsport New Zealand has announced the setting up of a special commission to look at all safety aspects of the sport. John McDermott, One News.
And the safety audit will be chaired by Christchurch lawyer Jeff Langham.
The price of progress is frustrating motorists in Wellington. They're getting bogged down in the biggest roadworks the capital's seen in over a decade. Nearly $10 million are being spent laying new drains and electrical and telecommunication cables. Economics correspondent Mike Jaspers has more.
Bloody pain in the ass.
A bit frustrated, but can't get anywhere fast at the moment.
Pisses me off, actually.
And who can blame them? The roadworks are everywhere. The terrace is being ripped up till November. And this new stormwater drain is going to take 3 months to lay.
For service vehicles, there's nowhere to park, and the parking wardens are being real vicious.
Well, they're blocking all my train. I've got no parking. It's been like this for 3 weeks.
Day and night, the streets are being torn up, much of it fibre optic.
Get a second chance at learning at a special school.
I want to make something of my life eventually, and where it all begins.
And the Royal New Zealand Ballet foots it with a legendary Kiwi band.
Sunday, June 10, a big day for Francis Mallet. Pulling on the Kiwi jersey for the first time, the hard road to success.
I haven't committed a crime. Why am I getting arrested? I'm not resisting.
Plus, we've got Wellington Police who claim they've made a breakthrough in one of their investigations into sex attacks in the city. That's on Homes at 7 o'clock.